Today, I want to explore with you a theme that feels really juicy and relevant to all you professionals, as we like to call ourselves, so those who've had some kind of corporate career, who are naturally quite soft people. Would you call yourself a soft person? I call myself a soft person. So the ways that you might know if you're a soft person is you were told as a child to toughen up. I heard that many, many times as I was growing up. You were maybe told you were too sensitive. Yeah, that old chestnut. And you cried fairly easily. And maybe that was something that embarrassingly, or you felt to be embarrassing, took into the work environment. I was a crier. Hold up my hand and admit to that into probably quite a late stage in my life. So there had definitely been moments when I've been at a desk in an open plan office with tears on my face. And obviously that has different effects on different people. And I know since then, this was probably like around the 2010s, things have evolved and people are a bit more helpful and aware of crying and well, but at that time I just felt like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm crying and I'm at work. So maybe you've had similar experiences too. And yeah, so those would all be signs that you have a natural softness to you. And you can see in some of my other videos on this channel, we've talked about being an empath and being a creative. And there's a theme emerging here, isn't there, of the type of people that we are. Um, what I want to talk about today is the journey that I've been on to blend softness, which comes naturally to me, with toughness, which sounds like, I've put on a jacket and it's kind of like bulletproof me and, I'm walking down the street like this, uh, and, starting on people or whatever whatever crazy images come into your mind when you think about toughness. Um, it's not wholly that. That's an extreme version of it, or a few extreme examples. It is actually a quality and a trait that I have really learned to tap into and help me through what otherwise you end up feeling like a kind of puppy dog rolling over and being kind of kicked in the gut, like that kind of like, defenseless is what I'm getting at. We are not necessarily equipped, or I wasn't in my upbringing, to be tough. We're told, or I was told, toughen up. You're not tough enough. But when I displayed those qualities, it wasn't really that acceptable. So if I did stand up for myself, or if, there was a dispute or something a confrontation, I picked up on the signals of, oh, she's not nice, or why is she shouting? Or, so there was a lot of like underlying, it's not socially acceptable for us to stand up for ourselves. So that's a very confusing message from a young age, and maybe you can resonate with that as well. But it left me in a lot of confusion about when it was okay to be tough, and I subconsciously decided that really it wasn't okay to be tough and to stand up for myself and to be seen confronting others. I'm not necessarily talking about in an aggressive way, even. I'm just talking about entering into dialogues where you stand up for your needs. And that's something really wrong with that, isn't there? If a woman like me, who's, pretty ordinary, had a pretty typical corporate career, is ending up in office environments where I haven't necessarily advocated for myself, where I felt like I've kind of been crumbling rather than just knowing where my inner strength came from. And it didn't serve me well. It meant that I didn't get promoted because and this is true feedback, the one of the bosses didn't think I was tough enough for the next level. So isn't that interesting? It's like I'd been taught all these qualities that were supposedly acceptable and helpful and useful within the environment, of friendliness and kindness and listening and empathy. But when it came down to it, I wasn't actually suitable material for the next level because I wasn't demonstrating that I could be tough and resilient. And I actually agree with that feedback that I had for that point in my life. I was what, in my mid 20s, 26, something like that. And I couldn't get to the next level because I simply wasn't ready for it. I didn't have the tools to navigate what I would probably have faced at that level. So the boss was protecting me. But at that point, I certainly wasn't given any kind of useful training or support from anyone to teach me this. And it can be taught and learned. And that's what I want you to stay for in this video is, what's the ways to embed those qualities that naturally feel so uncomfortable to us, and unsafe, quite frankly, not in a logical way. We know we're safe physically if we're in an environment where we choose to stand up for ourselves in a lot of situations, but our body, and this is kind of shadow work, so bear with me if you don't grasp it straight away, but our body has a survival based response to qualities that we see that we can associate with being outcast or being kind of cut off, being alone, because that on a pure survival level is never what our physical body wants for us. So that's what's going on under the surface when you want to stand up for yourself or when you know something's not quite right, but you can't get your voice out. It's not that you're in the wrong or that you're not capable of it. It's just that your body's trying to protect you from a state that it believes if you're seen as tough, outspoken, argumentative even, that you will be cutting yourself off from your tribe. So what I've learnt, mentally and then applied emotionally and somatically is a way of blending my softness with my toughness. So I can tell you a little bit about that. But just to tell you kind of what that looks like and see if it's a state that even appeals to you. Maybe you just want to stay soft and fluffy and be looked after. And, there are ways to live life like that, of course, and to do what you want from it. So I'm not saying you have to do any of this, but for those of you that feel, and you will feel it in your body, that it's holding you back in some way, or that there have been scenarios where you didn't advocate for yourself, or that you just kind of have not been seen as displaying those qualities and it's felt like it wasn't acceptable to do those things, this bit's for you. So what does toughness and softness look like when it's combined? It looks like me maintaining my natural connection to my emotions. It looks like me reading other people, which is something that comes very naturally to me as an empath and maybe to you as well. So I don't lose any of that stuff, any of that kind of, yeah, intuitive feminine side. But I have boundaries and I know where they are. And I also put myself in situations where I feel like I'm good with me. And that is kind of the core feeling. So hold on, that's not really very well phrased. Let me try again with that. What I mean is that I feel comfortable enough with myself that I don't need to adapt and make myself smaller or make myself kind of placate to others, um, because I'm afraid of kind of losing their favor. So a lot of this is really closely linked to people pleasing, you see. Um, and that means that people naturally test my boundaries less. I'm less exposed to bullies or to people that kind of believe they're better than me, um, because bullies, narcissists, people that like to kind of get one over on others are drawn to those that they can sense have the weakest boundaries and are the softest. So if you are someone that's naturally seen as quite soft, you might find that you've frequently encountered those types of people and those types of toxic cultures because you're kind of wide open to them. They will sniff you out and they will come for you. Um, and I don't want you to feel afraid or upset by that, but I want to put that as awareness, because when we start to do the work on ourselves to integrate some more toughness within, we actually break that cycle of, you might have found that you're frequently exposed to the same type of person, for instance, and it feels a bit like Groundhog Day, that boss who never stays late but always gets you to do everything for them, or that never like backs you in the company meetings or whatever it is. It takes many forms, but it's ultimately people taking advantage of you, and that's not on. So where was I at? I was talking about kind of what it feels like to be tough and soft at the same time. And I think it's quite a physical feeling as well. I think that you lean into your own body more and you feel more connected to the ground below you, and you feel almost like you've got this kind of bubble around you that is your space, and that others can't really get into or access. So there's less of like an energy drain from those types of people that might want to upset you or steal your energy, take your ideas, or exploit you in some way. Right, I feel like I should give some starting points around this. So, because I didn't pick this up overnight, this has been a 20-year journey, maybe more. I'm 40 now, and I started to see the signs of living in a way that was more pleasing to others than to myself in my early 20s, late teenage years, even. Um, and I really noticed them when I joined the corporate world, which is such a fantastic playground and learning zone for your characteristics. It's going to show you so many good mirrors if you can learn and adapt from it. So, the starting point for me, which is super interesting, I think, was actually my physical body, because being little Miss Academic here and having like shut myself away in the countryside and studied and all that stuff, I didn't have the strongest physical form. And sitting at a desk all day, for what, 35, 36 hours a week, again, was not encouraging me to develop physical strength, core strength, spine length, connection to the ground below me. So I was already feeling quite physically weak by the time I was in that full-time employment cycle. At uni, that kind of thing, I had more time to be active, even if I wasn't Miss Sporty. Don't get me wrong, I've never been someone that just sits around and does nothing, but your body needs a certain amount of hours in the week to be cared for, or it does just start to waste away, and you get the hunched shoulders and all of that kind of thing. So for me, I chose yoga. That was my entry point, and Pilates actually, Pilates before yoga, just to connect me and to develop a little bit of core strength. And it was so telling. I got into the first yoga class I've ever been to and tried to do a forward fold, and the backs of my calves and my hamstrings were so tight that I just couldn't even get my hands anywhere near the ground. And I'm in this class with these like yoga people and feeling just so judged and like, oh my God. But that's it. That's just how we start, isn't it? With something new, especially physical things. It can be a bit vulnerable. But yeah, I pursued it and I got myself to a place where I could really feel my body in a way that I hadn't before. I'd just been up in my brain. And then that just opens up more clarity, mental clarity as well. So, by the breathing, slower breathing, and all that good stuff that goes with the yoga, my brain was just going to a more constructive place at the ends of the classes. Um, and then it took me years on the kind of more emotional side of things to look at some of this when it feels safe to be tough. And there was shadow work involved in that. So meeting my inner tough girl and seeing, why she didn't feel safe to be out there in the world and advocating for me, why she was in my shadow. So I didn't know who she was. I hadn't met her before. I was very much in the identity of Miss Nice Girl. Um, and then just creating a bit of a dialogue between these two sides of me. So, where does Miss Nice Girl actually not need to be so in control of the wheel and to be running the show so completely? Just allowing her to step back a bit and bringing in this other side of me who really did have an important role to play, particularly when you run your own business, because you're going to get exposed to people rejecting you in terms of not always wanting to work with you. um, and you're going to need to advocate for yourself, get out there, get visible on social. I've had to do all of that. um, and there's some vulnerability in that. So, alongside that, you need a bit of toughness because you might get comments from people who don't agree with you. And you need to be able to get to that point of like, oh, well, so what? Yeah, which isn't easy when there's this like soft, squishy center that has been ultimately way too exposed. And yeah, we just kind of melt like ice cream, right? If we haven't got this protective shell. So it's not about dialing it up to 100% and just coming across as super hard and not letting anyone in and being really disruptive, argumentative, all that kind of thing. But it is about knowing that you are your own person and you have your own perspective that is valuable, and there's a place for it, even in rooms where not everyone will agree with you. So I feel like that's quite a lot to give you in this video, and I don't want to overwhelm you. This is a big subject. There's loads more I can say. It's super common for creative, bright, academic, particularly people in marketing and comms careers, that kind of thing, to just not have those. I would almost label them survival tactics for the real world. Maybe you do, maybe you got the right parenting, or maybe you had some good role models around this, but many of us didn't. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. If there's anything that's resonated here, feel free to share in the comments. And maybe take a look at your own inner tough kid, see what they need, see when they started going into hiding, and what they look like and where they want to help you now in your day-to-day reality, and just see what comes up. It's big, important work. It doesn't happen overnight, but by God, does it make a difference to your quality of life when you can advocate for yourself and mix that toughness with that lovely softness that you've already got. All right, take care. Have a great week. Bye.